Thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate everyone being here. This is a recorded session, so we'll begin moving right along. And you can, anything that you miss, or if you're joining us late, you can go back and watch the recording from the beginning forward. So appreciate everyone being here. This is our land development 102 session. Choosing your development team, working with developers. This is part of our Faith and Housing initiative that was started by Mayor Lyles in January of this year. And it's really designed to equip and empower the faith community to do community-based development work with a focus on affordable housing. And it is instruction to city staff to partner with and work alongside the faith community to develop affordable housing assets for our neighbors. So that's the overview of the entire initiative. We've had a summit and we've been going through some lunch and learn sessions. This is the third of those sessions. If you've missed any of those sessions, please go back to our Faith and Housing website and look back at the sessions that we have done in the past. So today's session will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll answer some questions at the end. You have options to ask questions a couple of different ways. You can put questions into the chat feature, or you can use the Q&A feature. And we have Harold with us who will be helping with any questions. So if you have any technical issues, you can drop a message into Harold Thompson, who's our meeting organizer, who can help you with that. So I never do any of this work alone, and I have my compatriot and partner, Miles Vaughn, who's working on this session with me, and we'll be tag teaming the content today. So Miles, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Warren. Appreciate that. And welcome, folks. So we also appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us for what we hope will be an insightful and engaging session, lunch and learn session, to say the least there. And as Warren indicated there, this is all had its genesis with regard to the mayor's Faith and Housing initiative. And as a result of the summit, we gleaned a couple of key takeaways, one of which was that the faith-based organizations that had an interest in engaging in affordable housing development wanted to get as much information as possible with regard to how that process can be undertaken there. We know that development in general, affordable housing in particular, is an extremely complicated and sometimes confusing process, to say the least there. So it's our intent to simplify this whole process to the greatest extent possible and provide you with enough information for you to make informed decisions about how you consider and pursue your efforts to make your affordable housing vision and passion a reality. Next slide, Martin. So the city's role is based upon a number of points there, one of which is we want to make sure that as by way of the summit, these lunch and learns and future sessions, that we bring all of the key stakeholders together. That's how you get exposure to what the process entails there, who are the key individuals there, particularly those that are locally based, so that as you encounter them and you work with them, you have some degree of familiarity with what they do in their various roles there. Of course, we want to provide you with as much technical information and guidance with regard to the whole process. One of the key sources of that information will be that of the various funding sources that the developers tend to use in developing affordable housing. And of course, in general, just supporting your endeavors there. Next slide, Warren. So what we'd like to do today in terms of goals is we want to do a deeper dive in regard to who the key players are within the plan on the development team there. How do you go about selecting these individuals there? How do you quantify their skills, abilities? And what are some of the best practices and lessons that we've learned to date as a result of partnering with faith-based organizations that have in fact engaged in the development of affordable housing. We're going to start off with a recap of the Land Development 101 session, the previous session, as well as to have a discussion with regard to who the key partners are, the participants, and how do you go about working with them and identifying them. What are certain things such as the risk associated with the developer fee? What are some of the common mistakes made in the whole development process? And last but not least, what are the next steps? Next slide, Warren. So as I indicated, the development process is a pretty complex one, to say the least there. But if you were to simplify it, you could break it down into sort of 7 steps, 7 development process steps there. One of which is that of identifying the actual site on which you'd like to develop the affordable housing. Regardless of what type of housing you'd like to develop, seniors, home ownership, multifamily, rental, you name it there, you want to make sure that you have possession of that site in order to develop on it there. And there have been instances whereby faith-based organizations and others thought they owned the site, thought they had title to the process. It was determined that, no, not quite. You've got a little bit more that you need to do to make sure you own that there. So site identification in terms of where the site is going to be physically located is critical, but also that of a feasibility study to determine whether or not you own the site and what can you build on the site. What dictates what you can build on the site is somewhat complicated there, but you want to factor in the site characteristics. Are there challenging topography issues there? Are there easements? What can you build in accordance to the Uniform Development Ordinance there with regard to what dictates how and what can be built on a particular site? Are all things that have to be taken into consideration during the feasibility study. And there are professionals that are well-versed in undertaking and assisting faith-based organizations in engaging in this feasibility study. So once you've identified the site, you have a sense of, okay, I can build this 50-unit senior development that's going to be independent living. We're going to have all sorts of services and assistance available to these seniors. Then you'd like to get into what the design of this development vision looks like there. Are you going to go Art Deco? Are you going to go more contemporary? All of that can be determined by bringing on a professional such as architects and engineers to help you actually come up with the physical product that you'd like to develop. You've got the product, you've got the site. Now you've got to identify the funding sources. One of the key sources for the development of affordable housing in our workhorse is the Housing Trust Fund. And if you're not familiar with that, I'd strongly encourage you to go back and take a look at the virtual session we had on the Housing Trust Fund 101 there. It gives you a good sense of how that gap financing is provided to help offset the costs associated with developing affordable housing. Once you've got your full design and you've got your permits, you've got the permitting from the county and you're okay and you're ready to rock and roll there, you're going to engage in the construction. You're going to make sure that you have a good general contractor, that the developer that you're working with there is on top of things, conducting periodic meetings, keeping you well abreast of where things are, because construction schedules slide frequently. So you want to know exactly where you are at any given particular point so that you can keep the community and your congregation informed. After the construction period, once you receive certificates of occupancy, then the fun starts there. You actually begin to lease up the property, get those tenants in there, and engage in the ongoing process of operating that property. Now, the ribbon cutting, the ground ceremonies, those are great. That's up front there, and that's all within a 24 to, let's say, 36-month period there. But the long haul, the extended stay, the key where the rubber meets the ground is the operation of that property there. That's going to be anywhere from an affordability period consisted of 20, 30, 40, and who knows how much longer. The longer, the better in terms of preserving that degree of affordability, but it's going to be absolutely key that you have on your team a solid property management company to make sure that the day-to-day operation of that property is going to be taking place appropriately. So those are the steps of the development process there. And what we'd like to do now is turn things over to my buddy Warren, and he's going to let you know about some of the key players on the development team. Take it
Great.
away, Warren.
Thank you, Miles. And if you want to hear, Miles went through very quickly basically what was discussed in the whole session last time we met. So if you're interested in more detailed information about the development process and really reviewing land use, go back and look at the Land Development 101 session, and you'll get more information about that process from that session. So what we're really focused on here is, as a faith community, how do you go back thinking about your property and discerning what your role is going to be in the development, and how to select other development partners to come in and do this work with you. In most cases, you are going to need other partners to assist in this. Land development is complicated, and so the community relies on a group of professionals to really help move forward development process. Typically, it's more than one organization or professional that's going to help you, because all of the work that goes on in this process is very specialized. But in general, there are several different roles that are going to be played in a land development process, and we have them up here on the slide. So a housing developer, well, what is actually a housing developer? They're an organization that has various expertise inside of that organization and takes over the general management of the entire development process. So they're the ones that are in charge of either being the builder or hiring the builder, managing the construction, putting the financing together, and seeing that project through from beginning to end. So, do you always need a developer? Well, not always. If you're building just a single family house, something that doesn't need rezoning, a very small project, you may not need a developer to do that. But once you get into a larger project, that may require site planning, rezoning, bringing utilities into the site, bringing roads or other types of infrastructures into the site. That's what developers specialize in, and that's why they become very important to your process. Oftentimes, you'll also have some type of housing service provider, especially on these projects that many faith-based organizations are interested in. Housing service providers provide various types of wraparound services to support the residents that are living in that development. In Charlotte, we have various types of supportive housing developments that have various types of providers that are providing services. Those can be financial literacy providers. Those can be addiction specialists. They could be folks that are trained to provide specialized services to people who are leaving homelessness. So it really depends on the nature of the type of development that you're working on, but you will typically have some type of housing development provider. And also, and sometimes the faith community might play play part of that role. For a faith-based development in a faith community that's thinking about development, a housing consultant is a really critical piece of this puzzle. Housing consultants are a non-biased third-party expert that you will bring into the process to help discern. They may help you pick a developer. They may provide you expert, non-biased opinions on what you can do on your site and how to bring the project forward. You may be in a situation where you're saying, geez, we have 3 or 4 acres that we want to develop. We've had a couple of developers reach out to us. One developer has this idea, another developer has this other idea, and we're just not sure what we should do and how we should move forward. That's the place that a housing consultant can really play a key role in helping you think through what you might want to do with a parcel and help direct you on what your next steps might be, the types of analysis that you might want to go out and get, or how you might want to think through the process of choosing a developer. There's an owner of this asset once it's developed, and in some situations it may be the faith-based organization, the church or synagogue or mosque that's working on the project, or it might be another organization. there's a saying in the development community when we were talking about affordable housing development that goes, if you've seen one affordable housing development, then you've seen one affordable housing development. And that just points to how specialized each of these developments are, how they're all organized differently, they're funded differently, they're designed to achieve different outcomes. And so the end goal may be that the faith community continues to be the owner of the project. And it may be that that's not in the best interest of the faith community and that they want someone else to be the owner. So it's another conversation and question to ask as you're going about this process. And finally, the housing sponsor. Now, when it comes to faith-based development, the faith community is almost always the sponsor of the project. It is your vision that you're bringing forward. It's often your land that you're bringing forward, or some other type of resource that you want to provide to a project. And so in this development process, the faith community is often the development sponsor, the housing sponsor that's really championing this idea and bringing it forward. So you'll see from this list, you will almost always have someone playing each of these roles. Sometimes there's one party that's playing a multiple role. For instance, the faith community could be the housing sponsor and the housing owner. They could be the housing sponsor and the service provider, or it could be individual different organizations that are playing each of these roles, just depending on how you want to organize your project. And you might be looking at that going, wow, Warren, that seems very complicated. And if you walk away with nothing else from this conversation today, we want you to know that it is complicated. And when we get to the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about what kind of resources the city is working on to help you work through this complicated process of developing land. Do I need a developer? The answer is usually yes. I mentioned on the last slide that if you're working on a very small, simple project, you may not need a developer, but most of the time that you will. Developers provide all of that regulatory expertise, planning, understand the financial design of these projects. We'll either have on staff or we'll have relationships with design professionals to help move this project forward. Another really important role that they play is that developers are designed. One of the reasons that developers get compensated is because they take risks. And so sometimes you look at developer compensation and you go, wow, they make a lot of money on these projects. And one of the things that I want to point out is that you're right, they do oftentimes receive a sizable fee for helping bring one of these projects through completion. But what you're often not seeing is all of the projects that they have worked on that don't move forward, that they don't get compensated on. So that's part of the role of the developer, is that they work in good faith on multiple projects, knowing that in many cases that project that they're working on may not make it to the finish line. So that's part of the role of the developer, is to take those risks and to move those projects forward. They can also help either supply part of the equity for the projects. A lot of times the developers invest in these properties, or they help secure financing. They work with their banking partners and their financial partners to secure the funding to make these projects move forward. They will almost always manage the construction project, and then sometimes they will act as the owner or the manager of the project, but not always once that project is completed. So when you enter into one of these deals with the developer, there will be some combination of risk sharing involved in the project. The faith-based takes some risk in the project, and the developer takes some risks. And a lot of times, again, the reason the developer is taking risks is because of that compensation that they'll get occasionally when these projects work out. So, you know, they put up the borrowing guarantees. They often fund a lot of the pre-development costs, and then what we call their pursuit costs, them spending their time trying to move these projects forward, knowing that not every project that they work on. But, you know, we want to be transparent that faith-based organizations are also taking some risks when they're working on these projects. The control of their land, and they're having to give up some of the decision making to the developer so that the developer can bring forward a project that's going to pencil out. Sometimes they put some investment into the project, and then just the ongoing operations that there may be some skin in the game from the faith-based pursuit. So this risk dynamic is something to be aware of and something that you'll negotiate as you begin working with a developer to move a project forward with you. So these are just some red flags in terms of working with developers. I will say that both Miles and I have spent careers working in affordable housing development, and the majority of developers that we work with are extremely passionate, mission-oriented experts in their field who have the best of intentions to provide a value-added solution to the projects that they're working on. And those developers would agree with us that some of these things are red flags and things that you need to think about when you get into conversations with developers. Your developer should always be transparent with you. And if you ever feel like that they're not being transparent, that might be a red flag. When you're vetting developers, you're gonna want to look at their development history and their track record to see that they have developed projects time over time. And a great question that was asked when we did the live session on this was, well, how would I know that information? And so we're going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. Talking to their previous clients, what was their experience with the developer? How did things go? Would you recommend us working with this developer? Unclear funding sources or questions around their financial stability. A lot of times developers bring a lot of equity to the table, and they should be on strong financial footing. It's one of the strengths that a development company brings to the table, and so that's one of the questions that you're going to want to ask in working with developers. You may want to go look at some of the developments that they've worked on in the past. They should be eager to provide you examples of their past projects so that you can go out and see exactly what that developer has worked on. You're going to want developers that have pulled permits and that they've had projects that have built in accordance with local planning and zoning laws, and they'll be able to provide you evidence of that. So developers who aren't able to provide that, that might be a red flag of that for working with that developer. And then over promising and under delivering. When the developer says that they're going to get on a call with you, are they getting on a call with you? Are they missing meetings? Do they seem to be too busy and not spending the time that they've said that they're going to spend with you? Those are all red flags that they might be either under-resourced or overworked if they're not able to meet the obligations that they lay out with you. So these are just the types of things that as you go through the process of vetting and entering into relationship with developers, most of what we have some great developers in this community, but these are some things from the faith community perspective that you might want to look out for as you're beginning this process. One of the things that we think is very important to communicate to you is an understanding of how a developer receives compensation. When you understand how the other party is being compensated for their work, it just makes the process so much more transparent so that you can truly understand what's going on. So in terms of affordable housing and working with a faith-based developer, oftentimes their primary mode of compensation is a developer fee. You'll see this as a line item in their budget. when they're looking at construction, and you'll see all of the construction costs. You'll see service delivery fees and pre-development costs, and then you'll typically see a line for a developer's fee. And most of the time, when it comes to affordable housing development and working in the faith-based realm, this is the primary mode that they're going to be compensated by. There are a number of ways that developers can be compensated. A couple of other ways are a profit participation or an equity stake, meaning that they're receiving profits off of a project, or they get a piece of the equity of the project, of the compensation of the full project that they're receiving. This is more often found in a commercial deal or a market rate residential deal, and less found on an affordable deal. And then again, also more found on a commercial deal or a market rate deal. If they own an equity stake, they're also going to be compensated due to the rise in value of that property when it gets sold. But for the intents and purposes of our conversation, most of the time what you're going to see is the developer charging a fee as part of the successful development of the project. So how do you decide, and I think that this is really kind of the crux of the conversation, how do you decide who to work with? So here's some steps that you can think through. One is doing some of the pre-work. So before you even have that first engagement with a developer, what is your vision of your site? What is your faith community's vision for your site? Why do you want to get involved in this project? What is the role of the faith community going to be in the project? Do you just want to be the sponsor and someone else own it, someone else develop it, someone else manage it? Or do you want to be more involved? And if you want to be more involved, what are the roles that you want to be involved in? And then how is the project going to be structured? What we've learned, Miles and I have learned as we've been doing this work, is that there is just a great diversity in our faith community and how faith communities are organized. Some faith communities own their land outright. Some are part of a larger group, like a diocese or a presbytery, where a larger ownership body is involved. All of that's going to go into the pre-work thinking about who needs to be at the table as you're moving these projects forward to make decisions in terms of how these projects will be structured, what the goal of the project is, and how you want it to move forward. Who do you need on your team? So once you understand the project, understanding the different players, what types of supportive services do you want to provide, if any at all, and who are the players involved in that, and when do they need to be brought to the table? Do you have an architect that's a member of your community that may have already drawn something up that you're interested in working with, or do you need that architectural service to come in from the developer? So really thinking through all of the pieces and parts of a project and how to move those pieces forward. You might be saying, well, Warren, we don't know all of the pieces and parts. That's a good point. And we're going to talk about that role of the housing consultant and how they can help you think through that. Developing some selection criteria. What's important to you? Is working with a highly resourced national developer something that's important to you? Are you more interested in a smaller developer who may have worked with other faith communities? There's pros and cons to both, and only you can think through your project and what you're trying to achieve and discern what the right selection is for your group. Do you want to use local people, or is that less important to you? When are you trying to deliver the project? What are some of the funding sources? How do you want to structure that? All of that goes into developing a selection criteria. Then going through a selection process, there's a multiple different ways to do this. You could just go through an interviewing process. You can do something more formal and put together an RFQ or an RFP. And then you could go through a various types of final selections where you have a steering committee that makes a selection. Does your church body need to make a final selection? All of that will go into how you structure your project moving forward. And then finally is Once you've done all of that work, that's when you get into the engagement process where you formalize through a written process an engagement document with the developer. It can be in the form of a partnership agreement, a contract, a memorandum of understanding, whatever works best, whatever works for the developer on their side, and whatever works for the faith community on their side. So that is the process of going through this work. And then just thinking about, what are some of the things that, what we've talked about up until this point hopefully helps you avoid the pitfalls. But this misaligned expectations is oftentimes something when we talk with developers that they notice sometimes a pitfall. That's why it's really important to go through that whole process to make sure that you really have a good understanding of what your expectations are so that you can clearly communicate those to your development partners and make sure that they get reduced into writing so that everyone has a real clear understanding. That's why a strong MOU is really important. Um, getting attorneys that are going to be involved in the process, getting them involved early to make sure that everyone understand who's working on what and whose roles and responsibilities are being covered by which partner in the deal. So, that's a pitfall that can be avoided. Uh, oh yes, too many cooks in the kitchen. I think that we all have experienced this throughout various parts of probably our working and our personal lives, of where you've got lots of people who are trying to move things forward, and because you have so many people that are trying to move so many things forward, actually nothing really happens. So there's some keys here on how to do that. Making sure that on your side, who's your project manager coming from your faith community or who you've selected, and making sure that everyone is bought in to that person, and then making sure that you have a really good communications plan throughout the process to make sure that you're clearly communicating to everyone and that everyone's clear on how things are moving forward. Overlooking key information. This is why having a developer or doing the pre-work is so important. Things like doing a title search on your property. Like Miles said, we have seen situations where we've seen projects moving forward. A certain group thinks that they have clear title to a property, and they don't have clear title to that property, which sometimes at best can delay a project and at other times can scuttle the project because they just don't have what they think that they have. Making sure that you've done your environmental review to make sure that there's no environmental issues on that project that would keep you from moving forward. Making sure that you truly understand the zoning that you have on that project and that it is zoned appropriately or can be rezoned to achieve the goals of your process. And then again, this assessment process, team member responsiveness, making sure that everyone on your team, both on the faith community side and on the developer side, has the capacity and the ability to move projects forward. There are a lot of well-meaning people in communities who have just too much going on and may be well-meaning and want to move a project forward, but just don't have the capacity to do that. And that can happen on the faith community side, and it can happen on the development side. So making sure that everyone just has the time to move forward these projects. Thinking through all of this in a very strategic way will help you, will greatly increase your chances of success as you move into the formal agreements and actually getting the development underway. And I just, one of the things that comes up, and I think that can oftentimes be part of that misaligned expectations is around timing. And so I'm just going to throw it out there for this group that's on this call with me and for posterity. Development in an urban environment takes a long time. Many of these projects are multi-year projects, 2 or 3 years and sometimes longer to start with an idea and end up with the development. There is just a lot of work to go through, and it's a very complicated process. So from the faith community side, just being able to communicate with your faith community that they're going to have to be in this process for a long haul is extremely important to make sure that we avoid those misaligned expectations in the very beginning. So what's next? And this is my favorite part of the conversation, because we have a lot of great things coming for you. So you might be walking away from this going, wow, this is way more complicated and involved. And I don't think that we have the resources inside of our faith community to really figure this out on your own. And that may be true. And this is one of the areas where the city is here to help. So one of the opportunities that you're going to see coming forward, you'll see this at the beginning of the year. So January 2025, is the city's going to open an application process where faith communities who need expert third-party assistance to help move their project forward are going to be able to apply to the city and receive a grant from the city to hire third-party expertise to help in your specific your situation. You might be saying, Warren, we really need one of those housing consultants to really look at what we got and provide us some expertise and advice about how to get the process rolling. You'll be able to hire that through this process. You might say, hey, we're pretty far along. We know where we're heading, but we need some help with some of this pre-development work. We need some help around the environmental review process or other parts of you'll be able to ask for a grant for that. Maybe you need help from an urban planner or land designer to say, hey, can you look at this parcel? Like, we're not even sure we can do anything here. Would you take a look at it and let us know what options we have? You'll be able to apply for that through this process. So while on the one hand, we're saying this is a very complicated process, we're also saying here that your mayor and your city council have said, we understand that it's a complicated process and we want to provide resources. We are also going to do a vetting process. We have an open request for qualifications that we're requesting qualifications from partners that can help you. City staff is going to vet that and make that list available to you so that you'll be able to enter in directly to a relationship with that provider. We're going to provide the funding directly to you, but we're not going to get in between you and the provider. We're going to let you move that relationship forward together and just provide the funding resource, but we're going to do some vetting for you. You might be saying, well, Warren, we want to be part of a larger conversation. We have another opportunity that we're going to be offering in January as well, and that's going to be a cohort style development approach. We're going to bring in industry experts who have run these types of cohort development processes throughout the country. The way that works is you'll join with 8 to 12 other faith communities that are interested in doing this work, and you'll systematically work through this process together, where in a 6 to 12 month period, you will have a vetted project that you can then begin to start talking to developers or start really engaging with developers on how to move that project forward. That is going to be another opportunity that we're going to have together. We're also going to continue to provide more education, more lunch and learns like this on different subjects going forward. So stay tuned for those as well. And then you might be saying, well, Warren, that sounds great. We're not sure which way we should jump or what we should do next. Is there any way that we could have someone just kind of look at where we're at and give us some advice on what we should, some options about where we go next? Yes. So early in 2025, we are going to host a flash advising event. So we are going to get industry experts to all meet up in one place, and we're going to have a drop-in event where you can bring some information to that event and get some immediate feedback from some developers about some options or some recommendations on how to move forward. To help you prepare for that, we are working on a readiness checklist for you, for questions to ask your faith community, ask about what you're interested in, ask about your land and your assets, so that you can prepare to be ready to get some questions answered for you. So that is what is what's next, what we're working on, more educational opportunities, 2 grant opportunities coming in January, and the Faith in Housing flash advising event that is all things for you to stay tuned and be involved in. We really appreciate your engagement. Miles and I have been working on the Faith in Housing Initiative since January, and we've been really encouraged by how engaged our faith partners are in this work. I am going to pause here to see if there's any questions in chat or in the Q&A.
Yes, Warren, we don't have any questions in the chat, and I do not believe we have any in the Q&A so far.
Okay, I'll give people another 20 seconds to finish typing if they might be typing. And if they're not if that's not the case, then we will end the lunch and learn for today. Again, next steps coming up. Go to our Faith in Housing web page. There's 2 opportunities there. One, to sign up to make sure you're receiving information as we're putting it out. There's a special sign up to receive information. There's another sign up there to be part of our Faith in Housing directory that we update from time to time, and that is something that we publish. So if you want not only to get information from the city about the events and opportunities that are coming up around the Faith in Housing initiatives, but if you also want to put your information out there so that people can contact you directly, both of those opportunities are available on our website. And since I've not heard any more from Harold about another, oh, there I see a question right there.
Okay, yes, Sylvia Biddle Patton, Dr. Sylvia Biddle Patton, is there a minimum number of units required to be eligible as a faith-based partner with this effort?
Absolutely not. You might want to develop one parcel or 1 unit or 2 units, and we are happy to help you figure that out. So regardless of the size of your projects, whether you want to develop 3 units or 300 units, we are willing to engage with you. Maybe you don't want to develop housing at all. Maybe you want to figure out a way to reuse your facility to offer some kind of supportive or community service. That will be eligible for support as well. So you don't even need to be working directly on the housing initiatives. You might be working on something adjacent. Maybe you want to provide daycare for low and moderate income households. Maybe you want to provide a space for nonprofits that are working in housing to utilize your building for educational or counseling opportunities. We also want to work with you on that. We just have an architect who I appreciate is agreeing with me, is just emphasizing how important it is to team up thoroughly with experts to be working on this. We can't agree more. Again, we try to point out how complicated and technical this work is, and we want to give you the resources. We know that sometimes the cost of bringing these resources in may be a strain for a faith community, and that's where the city believes that we can step in and help for you to get information to find out if an idea that you're thinking about is a viable idea to move forward. Thank you all for participating, for staying tuned in. We'll end this session today, and we really look forward to continuing to engage with you. Go to our Faith in Housing website to sign up for our next activities to make sure that you're receiving information. And I really look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care.